Great. Some other places, other schools in China, Guangzhou. Oh, great. This is great to see everybody and where they're from. Thank you for taking the time to do that. So on the next slide is a list of some of the topics that we're going to cover today. And these are things that we've come prepared to talk about. We're going to work through these slides, but please feel free to ask questions. You can, we ask you to mute your microphones unless you're going to be speaking, but you can always unmute and ask a question. You can also put a question in the chat box, and Micah is going to keep us informed if there are questions, and she'll share those with us. Or you can use the Zoom raise your hand icon. Whatever you feel most comfortable with, please go ahead, because we're here today to answer your questions. So Shannon's going to talk to you a little bit on the next slide about what the ILCC is.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Monica. The ILCC, just you can tell by the name, it says we hope that it will answer as many questions and more questions than it raises. So it is a group of like-minded individuals who are really skilling up in the areas of literacy and leadership and coaching. So that's really what we're focused on. And some of the key features really are it is this cohort-based model. So when we talk about that, it's a duration of 2 years. We come together for 5 times in person over the course of 2 years, and each of those meetings is approximately 3 to 4 days. And so it's a combination of workshop and information time, collaborative time and sharing time, and then we host at school sites for at least 3 of the 5 sessions, so that we also get time in classrooms working with students, so that you get a mix of kind of the ideas and the theory, but actually a real strong dose of practice as well. And let's go ahead to the next slide. The history of the cohort, we've alluded to that a little bit. This is a picture of the very first cohort I think this was their 2nd or 3rd meeting. This was when AAIE would have a summer institute. So this is in my hometown of Seattle, Washington. But it started in 2007, and we have just finished our 8th cohort. We just finished, what, 2 weeks ago, Monica? 3 weeks ago, with a cohort in CEESA, the CEESA conference in Malta. But in that time period since 2007, we have had over 175 teachers that represent over 75 schools internationally. And participants in the cohort, at their time of membership in the cohort, the roles that they held varied from classroom teacher to grade level leader to curriculum coordinator to literacy coach, sometimes directors of curriculum. And they have gone on into other leadership roles. Now, our participants hold all of those same roles: classroom teacher, curriculum coordinator, director of teaching and learning, as well as we've got principals and deputies, heads of school, and those kinds of positions throughout the world. And as you know, and as Ed alluded to, one of the benefits of this kind of a program is within a region, we can really help to elevate a region, because as we build that network and people move schools within the region, they come in with a certain level of training and understanding about the kind of work that's happening and the goals that they want to achieve.
So I want to talk with you briefly about the creators and developers of the cohort. This is something that everyone who has participated in the ILCC takes great pride in. So the woman on the left, Bonnie Campbell-Hill, some of you may have worked with her at schools that you've worked in. She started consulting with international schools in the early 2000s, and she quickly became a big favorite of international schools. She was working as a professor at the time at the University of Washington, and she had worked with Carrie Ike, who is the person on the right. Carrie was working in Colorado, was doing deep work with the Colorado Writing Projects with a number of different school districts in Colorado, and was teaching at a couple of different universities, and they got to know each other. And when Bonnie started to work with international schools, she brought Carrie into the fold. And over the years, I can't count the number of schools that they've worked with, but they worked with many, many different schools. And it was Bonnie who realized that the international schools were missing coaches, and that we could greatly benefit from having coaches at our schools. And that is really where the literacy coaching cohort was born. So on the next slide, I want to show you a very recent celebration we had, which was something that we're very proud of. The Association for the Advancement of International Education gave recognized Carrie and Bonnie for the great work that they had done. And we've always had great testimonials from our graduates, but it was really heartwarming to know that AAIE would recognize Bonnie and Carrie in this way. Their impact was so strong that this award was really quite significant. Sadly, Bonnie is no longer with us, but her daughter, who you see there on the top right-hand side, was able to accept the award on Bonnie's behalf. And Carrie was there as well. And on the bottom, you see just a few people who were at the conference, the AAIE conference, who have worked, who Bonnie and Carrie had actually worked in their schools or worked in their regions, and they were there to celebrate with them and to congratulate them. So this is just a small sampling of the people who were there and congratulated them, but it was really quite wonderful to get this recognition. So we're very proud to be a part of important work like this that has such deep roots and is so well recognized.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that, Monica, is that by joining into the International Literacy Coach cohort, certainly it's a program and it's a course of study that we think is really grounded in really strong adult learning principles and has evidence of impact, but certainly it's a community.
Yes.
And by joining this, you build your network with your participants who are in your cohort, but you're really part of a larger community that has just been growing and building momentum around the world. So in the time that we spend together in this cohort, here's a sampling of some of the topics that we really delve into and study. And of course, obviously, literacy coaching. So we're going to be talking about what is the latest in the research, what's the evolution that's happening in literacy instruction so that we can, help develop the readers, writers, communicators, listeners, thinkers that we want to. But we also know that in order to do that and to do that from a systemic lens in a school, that we need to delve into elements of leadership, managing change, thinking about the context of the DEI work. We talk a lot about adult learning, and then this idea of timely topics. You see there is that last bullet. The just-in-time part of it is each cohort develops their own unique identity. And I'm sure you understand that because as veteran teachers, every year and every group of students has their own unique identity. And each cohort typically has, an aspect of literacy that is rising to the top or feels really important at that moment. So like cohort 2 that you see here, this is one cohort that really wanted to focus on spelling, and they probably focused on spelling more than any other of the cohorts. This last cohort that we just finished with, as you can imagine, was talking about early literacy instruction, science of reading, and assessments, and how do our assessments need to change. And so we say that this is a sampling because these are foundational and we dip in and out of these, but also we customize for what is the just in time and what is the unique needs that you're dealing with in your schools or the challenges that you want to be able to really rally around and work together to start to address. And yeah, there we go. Just a couple more photos. What you see in the photo on the left that's elevated up a little higher, all of a sudden that group looks a little bit larger, and that is by design, because I mentioned earlier that the cohort meets 5 times over the course of 2 years. One of the things that we know in terms of setting your system up, setting your school up for sustainability and for long-term change and impact is that as leaders in the classroom and middle level leaders in our school, that it really takes the support and championing of broader school leadership. So in session 4 of the 5-session series, we have an administrator from your school attend alongside, because we've probably all also been in the situation where off we go to a training or a conference or an event that has great meaning to us as an individual. And when we find ourselves back at school, it can be difficult sometimes to really communicate the essence of what it is that we're trying to do. And so this is one of the features that we think helps schools really build for sustainability. And by the time the administrators join, we've walked you through, as literacy leaders and coaches, some really important ideas, and then we help facilitate those discussions. And we typically do some live in-classroom work during this session so that administrators can also see how that's working, and we use that as a starting point to launch some of those discussions. Excuse me.
And Sharon, I was going to add oh, can we go back to the other slide? I was just going to add one other thing about the logistics of the cohort, which is that we meet for 5 sessions over 2 years. So 4 of those sessions you attend on your own, or unless you have a colleague from your school that's attending, but there's one session, the second to the last session, session 4, is the session that your administrators attend. And these sessions occur not only at EARCOS conferences, the educational conferences, but also we will be soliciting host schools. So that might be something that if you apply and you are accepted, that might be something that your school would like to do as well, would be to host one of our sessions. That would be great. Sorry, Shannon, go ahead. Next slide.
No, jump in anytime. So the 5 sessions roughly look like this. This is the sequence that we follow. In the first session, we do a lot of laying foundations. And this slide ended up to be all about the C's. It didn't really set out to be that way, but suddenly it became that way, right? So in the first session, there's a lot of just building community and talking about curriculum and what does a comprehensive high quality curriculum look like in your schools. And then we start to delve into conferring with students in the classroom. And then in the second session, we continue that and really start to talk more about models of change and how can you facilitate that within your schools. And Monica typically does those 2 sessions with the cohort on her own. And then at session 3 is typically when I will join, and then for sessions 3, 4, and 5, we're both there. And in session 3, that's when we really start to delve into different kinds of coaching models. So having been in instructional coaching, as I said earlier, for a number of years, I've studied and am familiar with a number of instructional coaching models. And so we don't subscribe to just one. However, we pull from many. So we pull, for example, from Diane Sweeney, from Jim Knight, from Elena Aguilar, and then I know that Kim Cafino is leading a lot of work in your region. And I know that Kim also has developed her model, and she's pulling from a lot of those other ones that I've already mentioned. And then I also am trained as an executive leadership and performance coach. So we bring in just some of that leadership coaching as well into the instructional coaching aspect. And then that sets us up for session 4 that we just talked about, where we really start to consolidate and synthesize ideas. And we have your administrators there. You can see the C word is really important there. That's about coherence, because that's really important for developing that sustainability and having the impact in your schools that you'd like to have. And then by session 5, it's a lot of culmination and celebration. Throughout the entire program, there is a lot of, it's really highly engaging activities. So you will be practicing, you will be engaging in a lot of different coaching triads and practicing adult learning, practicing facilitation, developing yourself as a leader. One of the culmination activities in session 5 that we do is, by that point, we have you doing some videotaped work in your school setting with your teachers. So it can be a coaching conversation, it can be facilitation of a team meeting, it can be a meeting between you and an administrator. And we use that video, and in small groups, we do some protocols to really practice and get some feedback. And then just that celebration piece. It's really a nice time too for everybody to just connect and talk about how we want to continue and build their networks. And who attends? I've said this a couple times, but I want to reiterate for everyone on this call. It is not a requirement or an expectation that you hold the role of coach or literacy coach as a member of the cohort. We know that the titles in schools vary. We know the sizes of schools vary. We know that the resources in schools vary. So we have classroom teachers, we have curriculum coordinators, we have grade level leaders. We've had a number of ELL teachers and specialists. We have teachers across all divisions from the early years all the way through high school. Even in this last cohort, we had lower school, middle school, high school teachers. We've had curriculum coordinators. We had a principal who joined the full cohort this last time around. So your current title is less relevant. What's more relevant is that you are a literacy leader in your school, or you are an aspiring literacy leader. So this is a training ground where you can develop the skills for the leader you want to be, as well as develop the skills and hone the skills that you're practicing right now in the role that you have. So when we plan our activities and our learning engagements, we really plan with that range in mind, and we're constantly, making accommodations or adaptations to make sure that the relevance is there for the roles that you likely currently hold while you are a member of the cohort.
And even if your school isn't in a position to add a full-time coaching position, because we've had schools where participants come from schools that don't envision the opportunity, excuse me, at least in the short term, to add a full-time coaching position. But there are many ways to bring coaching and integrate coaching into the culture of your school without having a full-time coach. Of course, we think that's the best way, but it's not the only way. So if your school is interested in learning more about coaching, but they're not ready to commit to a full-time position, don't let that stop you from applying, because we can discuss and share with you many different models and structures, and one of those may very well work well in your school setting.
We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you, Micah. So Ed said when he introduced us, this kind of work is a commitment. So the commitment to the cohort is the in-person attendance at the 5 sessions. It is that you have the endorsement of your school, and that your school really recognizes an administrator will attend with you in session 4. And then your commitment during your presence is really that you will be open, and you're open to sharing the work of your school, to building a network, and to receiving feedback on the skills and ideas that you are practicing and honing in on. I'll like, as an example, oftentimes, especially as we move along and everyone in the cohort starts to know each other, we'll have like little mini sessions where our cohort members will be presenting with each other. And in the last couple cohorts, because cohort 7 did not get to finish in person because of the pandemic. So cohort 7 finished online. But with and as I've watched since 2007 and watched the way that we can use technology to support the cohort, that's one way the cohorts have changed over the years. In 2007, when we weren't together, it was primarily email as a way of communication. Now we have some cohorts have Facebook groups, some cohorts have WhatsApp groups. This last cohort, would use their WhatsApp group and they would talk about a common dilemma, and they would, on a Saturday, they would spontaneously jump on a Zoom. And so they were there in between the formal sessions to support one another. And then we are in the process right now of launching an online community where we're going to be bringing all of the cohorts together to benefit. So I mentioned that earlier about you're not just a member of your cohort, but this larger community. And so we're creating one online space where we can bring hopefully what will be our 9 cohorts all together to have this network around the world where you can just share your challenges, your dilemma, your successes with one another. You know, and then the benefits of certainly having that community and having the network that really, you know, extends beyond the 2-year period. In the short term, you know, you have access to a great number of resources. You have access to a great number of minds who are thinking in similar ways that you are, people who are advocating for best practices and coaching and mentoring one another. And then we also find that when that moment comes as international teachers that you're thinking of, you know, seeking out a different school or a different region of the world, the network when you decide that it's time to look for a different position, or the network when you decide you want to grow into a different position. So we've seen participants who are a teacher when they join, but then who actively seek that next step. They seek that curriculum coordinator role, or they seek that role that has the title of coach. This network jumps into action and really helps one another find that great fit for the school that will fit their individual goals and needs.
So the enrollment process is pretty straightforward, and I think some of you who have emailed me already have received information about the process, but basically it's all the aspiring participants complete an application, and it includes a statement of interest, your resume, outlining your experience as a literacy leader or plans that you have to get more involved in literacy leadership at your school. We also ask for a letter of support from a colleague as well as from an administrator in your school, because remember, your work will be greatly enhanced if you have the support of an administrator at your school. And it doesn't have to be a principal. It can be an assistant principal. It can be the literacy coach at your school right now. It can be the director of curriculum. We've had many different people attend and support the participants in the role of administrator. The process is really designed so that we can ensure that the participants have the requisite knowledge and literacy instruction to become or further your skills as a teacher leader in your school. That's really important to us. And because peer collaboration and sharing is such an integral part of the cohort, we want to be sure that you're going to be able to share your experiences and your resources with the group. At the end of the program, you'll receive a certificate that demonstrates that you've completed the coaching cohort. And there also is an opportunity for those who are interested to also get course credit if that's something that any of the members in the group would like to do. We have that option to request that as well. So applications are due in May. Of course, you can submit them at any time. The process is that I'll review the applications and consult with Shannon, and then we'll notify applicants of their acceptance. So once that's done and we have your commitment that you're going to be participating, then we quickly go into action to find our host schools. And so at that point, then you'll be asked if your school would be willing to host us so that we can confirm locations and dates so that schools can do some forward planning. And I'll be the one who works with those host schools and shares information with them so that as soon as possible, we'll be able to get locations and dates to the participants. So the best case scenario is that by the time school starts next year, not only has everyone been notified, but we also have host schools confirmed. But we definitely will have locations for next year confirmed by the start of school in fall of 2024. So now we're open to questions. I don't see any questions in the box, so you can either log them in the chat, or you can go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have.
Hi, I have a question. Hi, Monica.
Sandra?
So I had two questions. What is the application? Is it going to be sent, or is it like a specific website or link for the application? And my second question is, do you address ways to help teachers or help coach with neurodivergent learners, like, or in that field?
Yes, so the answer to the second question is yes. I think that that is a part of our curriculum that has really grown over the last few years, over the last few cohorts, and is something that came from the group of teachers that we've been working with as participants. So definitely that is an area that we will work with and is included in the topics that we discuss. Related to your first question was about the application process. So the brochure that was sent out about the webinar and that was sent out about the EARCOS cohort includes my email address, and I'll go ahead and put it here in the chat. And if you would like application information, all you need to do is email me and I'll send that information to you. Hold on, there we go. That's me. So just go ahead and shoot off a quick email, and then I'll send all the application information to you, as well as an outline of the cohort, just to give you a little bit more information that you can have in writing.
Thank you. This was awesome. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome, Sandra. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Monica, we have a question from Sammy from Singapore. Can I ask, what is the curriculum alignment that the program uses?
So Sammy, can I ask you to elaborate just a little bit on your question? That word curriculum alignment is used in a couple of different ways. Can you just elaborate a little bit, either in the chat or just open your microphone and just give a little bit more detail?
Yes, of course. Thank you guys so much. We are currently trying to align to the AERO standards at our school here in Singapore. So I'm trying to figure out literacy-wise, what standards do you guys align to?
We don't align to any one set for exactly the reason that you're bringing up, which is we have some AERO schools that participate, but we also have Common Core schools that participate. We have some British system schools that participate. So you'll be exposed to a couple of different curriculum documents that that hopefully will support your work. Sometimes we've done some deeper curriculum work around specific standards and had some interest groups that have done deeper work around specific curriculum. So if you find you're not getting the kind of connection that you need or the kind of alignment, we can always provide extra support for that.
Yeah, and I would add on, because there are, those different curriculum alignment standards that you might align to, but what we do have are some frameworks, right? And so Monica often will walk people through some frameworks or a tool to help audit your curriculum. So does our curriculum have a set of standards, even though that might vary? What's the suite of assessments? What's the suite of practices? How do you diversify for neurodivergent learners, for example? So there are some elements of framework and some pillars of foundational curriculum components that then you can customize and individualize for. It is common that the schools that we're working with are using AERO or Common Core, as you mentioned, and I'll reiterate what Monica said. If we're doing a little mini session about curriculum, that might actually be the grouping strategy we use in that moment. We might then have the schools that are aligning to the same curriculum all sit together and work together so that we're building that collaboration.
Shannon, Dolly has a question. I'm going to let you take it. Is there a specific timeline for the 5 sessions? Is it every quarter? In the summertime? I want to make sure this is a time commitment feasible for my schedule. You want to talk a little bit about that, and then I can add on.
Yeah, so we've done it a couple different ways. Sometimes we have 3 sessions the first year and 2 sessions the second year, and sometimes it's been the opposite, 2 and then 3. And the reason, one of the reasons why we don't have it completely set right now is that that's one of the things Monica will get input on from the participants and what works well. We also typically do one of the first 2 sessions will align with an EARCOS event. So potentially then with the fall event that EARCOS has. And session 5 nearly always is at the regional event. So like that culmination celebration would be like in that larger context. So when we say cohort 8 just graduated, it was in conjunction with the CEESA conference. Typically, there's usually one that's October-ish in both years. Session 4 oftentimes falls around January, February. We've done it in November. We've done it a little later. It's a little tricky because we have to pay attention to when the administrators are in their recruiting season. So we have sort of a loose template that works for us. It's not exactly 1 per quarter. It would be more like in the year that there's 3, it would be more like 1 per trimester.
And you asked about, and so the locations and the time frame is something that the participants, once everyone's been accepted and we have our cohort, then you have some input into whether you want 3 sessions the first year and 2 the second, or 2 the first year and 3 the second, and those locations as well. That's why we can't really confirm, because we do like to get some input from the cohort members, and it also depends on which schools have agreed to host us as well. And I do see another question that kind of ties into that, which is the expenses. So I think it's from Nina in Guangzhou. So the I think I'm understanding your question. If I'm not, Nina, you can jump in after I've answered it. But the cohort expenses are paid prior to each cohort. So prior to session 1, you'll be asked to pay the registration fee. And then, of course, there's travel to get to wherever the cohort session is held, and a hotel. Some people stay at a hotel that's recommended by the host school or by EARCOS. Other people get an Airbnb. Other people stay with teachers they know in that city. Other, people group together and get a hotel room. The housing varies a great deal according to the location and the preference of the cohort members. But the school typically has to be, if your school is going to be supporting you 100%, which that isn't always the case, but it is often the case, they need to be prepared to pay your registration fee as well as your travel and your lodging for the days that you're at the cohort. I hope I answered your question, Nina. And then there was another question. Hold on. Oh, Ed has a comment in here that he will be sure that all the people that participated will get the flyer about the cohort, and my email address is on there as well. Thank you for that, Ed. And then Shannon, I think there's a question from Danxia Huang. I apologize, Danxia, if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Do you see that one, Shannon? Is this program focusing on English language coaching or language coaching in general? As my main focus is on Chinese language. I'll let you take that one, Shannon, because we've had host country language teachers often.
Yeah, we have. And so when it comes to the coaching, we're really coaching on the learning development, I guess I would say. So the coaching strategies or the coaching mindset and the ways that we can support a child's growth and development over time is transferable. So you can use some of these same strategies and the same approaches in the ways you work with students and the ways you work with teachers in the language of instruction for your role in your school. in the cohort, our language of instruction is English. But as I said, we've had ELL teachers, and we've had predominantly when we had host language, is we have done we've had a number of Arabic speaking teachers and teachers in the Arabic program that have then translated it into their work. So it is transferable. And I think that kind of goes back to my earlier comment about we really recognize and try to honor the roles that you currently have and think about what can we do to make it relevant. And that's a place where I think one thing that's worth mentioning is a routine and ritual that we have is we ask for feedback daily. So in all, we keep talking about the 5 sessions, but in all, it adds up to 19 days. And so for 18 of those 19 days, we ask for your feedback. So if at any moment in time you're finding that it's not quite meeting your needs, or you have a suggestion of something that we could do to better meet your needs, we've got some built-in structures. We always invite you to talk with us in person, but we solicit feedback, written feedback every single day. And so we'll make those adjustments too and make sure that we fully understand. So if you're teaching in that context of Chinese language, we'll do everything we can to understand that and to help match.
Thanks, Shannon. Marcella asked about school hosting, and I do have information about that. If your school is interested, I can send kind of an outline to you of what that involves. It does not involve organizing accommodation or travel for the cohort. It does involve organizing accommodation for me and for Shannon, but that's basically it's logistics at the school, getting us from a central point in the city to the school site every day, and managing, lunches and snacks and that sort of thing while we're at the school site. And because we do work in classrooms from session 1 onward, there is a need to manage those logistics as well. But if your school is interested, I'd be happy to send some initial information and they can begin thinking about that. And then Cassandra's asking about the school endorsement, and your school certainly does not need to support you financially. We've had various candidates that for whatever reason have supported themselves, but we absolutely need a letter from an administrator at your school who endorses your attendance, not just so that we're sure that you can be present at the cohort, but also so that you have their support to translate the work that you do in the cohort to your school site. So we want to be sure that you have the opportunity to try some things out, to talk with your administration about different avenues that you can take, to share some of this work at your school. So that school support, I guess is the word I would use, is really important. Shannon, do you want to take Sammy's question about school useful for whole school literacy work?
Yeah, the short answer to that, Sammy, is yes. So we designed to be attentive to elementary needs, middle school needs, and high school needs. And again, once we know the demographics and the membership of the cohort members, that helps us to, going back to Monica's question about how do we find the classrooms to work in, we'll take that into account. And so we'll make sure that the classrooms that we're working in, or your specific example, what kind of data are we looking at? So we might have conversations about what kind of data are we typically looking at in early years? What are we looking at in a K-2? What's the data we have in a 3-5 or 3-6? What kind of middle school data? Like that's just, kind of an example of what would it look like at these different levels. In the most recent cohort, we had 2 high school teachers. And so we were doing lots of adaptations. Yeah. And actually to link that back to your earlier question, Sammy, we did in session 3 with the last cohort, when we were talking about how do you identify learning targets within your curriculum that you can then coach into. And we actually used Common Core as our set of standards. And we picked one standard and we mapped that standard vertically from kindergarten through high school and thought about what does this look like? I can't remember. I think it was about finding main idea. I can't remember for sure which one we did, But we did map that all the way, and you can, like around the room, or like all the posters, and what does it look like to see kids develop in this standard across the years. So in that sense, how are we using this, and what is a student's trajectory of development over time? Yes, so we do address the needs of the different levels.
Ed suggested that I give a few more details about the actual structure, so I'll do that quickly. But if you write to me and ask for application information, I'll send the actual structure to you, an outline of the structure, so you'll have it in writing. But typically our sessions are 4 days, except for the final session that's 3. And we usually meet Wednesday through Saturday. The final session is Thursday through Saturday. And usually it's a, typical school day, about 8:30 to 3:30 or 4 is how the sessions are organized. Tatiana's asking if we're going to explore shifts, and I wouldn't just say we're going to explore shifts. I would say that we are constantly looking at current research in literacy. And so that's, of course, there was a particular emphasis on that with this last cohort 8, but we always are bringing in any new research that we feel is credible and is supported in the literature. So that's going to be a constant part of our work. We'll be looking at current research in literacy, not just the shifts, but looking at much of the current research. Shannon,
Monica,
go ahead.
well, you mentioned it, like a typical day, it's like a typical school day, but that makes me think we have to say, and also the cohort gets together to do things that are fun. Like most cohorts have their own Spotify playlist. Cohorts have been known to have karaoke events. Typically in each of those, when we're together for 4 days, typically it's optional to attend or not, but typically at least once the cohort will go out to dinner together. And so, and members of the cohort typically take advantage of the city that we're in, and they'll try to go out and see some sights or experience the city. We were known a year ago when we were in Vilnius, the weather was gorgeous. And so we designed intentionally some walk and talks to get some people outside and moving. And so, we're not just in the classroom all day, every day, but we are, injecting some fun and an opportunity to build connection into the work as well.
Yeah.
And you never know, like Monica usually has a few surprises up her sleeve too to keep us on.
Just a couple.
Yeah.
Sharon, I was going to have you take Sarah's question too, and then I'll take the next one. Sarah's asking about the focus. We were talking about different interest areas that emerge with different cohorts.
I'm super intrigued by your question, Sarah, because I don't know that we've solicited that in advance before, to be honest. So you have my wheels thinking about that maybe, Monica, we want to add that into the application, like what would be specific areas of focus. It's
Great
typically something that emerges in the first session when the cohort's coming together. I mean, you've all been parts of groups that come together like this. And so some time is spent really building common agreements and working norms and identifying your priorities. And so we've typically done that live as part of the first session, but you do have me thinking that potentially we might want to start that a little earlier as part of the application process, Monica.
Right. I think I'll definitely include that if it's not included in there. Hannah, you asked some questions. I think we've answered some of them, but if you shoot an email to me, there's a lot of information about costs based on prior cohorts. And Ed Green and I from EARCOS sat and really hammered out what we thought costs would be for the EARCOS region. So I think they're pretty solid. We never know for sure because costs do vary country to country. So it depends on which countries are hosting us as to what the costs are, but we really try to stay within the estimates that I have on that. So be sure that you request that information from me. I think Shannon talked a little bit about coaching models. Shannon, do you want to just say that one more time really quickly?
I can list a few. We do oftentimes use Diane Sweeney's student-centered coaching as just a core text because it's short enough and readable enough and accessible enough. And then through the course, we actually then make some comparisons, do some compare and contrast and some alignment with Jim Knight's work from the Impact Cycle. We look at Elena Aguilar's work. As I mentioned, Kim Cafino is doing a lot of work in your region, but then we also pull in a lot of reflective practice work. So for that, we lean on the body of work of cognitive coaching and adaptive schools. We use a lot of work, critical friends kinds of protocols from National School Reform faculty. That really helps with some group facilitation and some adult leadership. And we also have like really frank conversations about which aspects of the models are working well in your schools and in your context. Through this work, kind of going back to make a parallel to, people have different sets of standards they're aligning to, but we establish some underlying frameworks. So there's different specific coaching models, but there are some underlying frameworks. So in session 3, we spend the whole first half a day on session 3 really talking about what is your definition of coaching, what's the mission and vision for coaching in your school. We'll talk about, regardless of the various coaching model, what are the ways that you build partnerships with individual teachers, with teams of teachers? What are the strategies you have for building a partnership with your administrator? So those are just some examples of resources and experts that we pull from and rely on, as well as like how we sort of navigate the fact that this is like a like-minded group. And I think it's super fascinating because one of the benefits of the group is that we find those common threads and those commonalities, but also our thinking gets stretched and nudged in new directions when we start to hear the nuances or the different lenses in how it plays out in different schools. So I think that's one of the benefits of the cohort, is that you get reinforced in the work that you're doing and the way you're designing for your school. And at the same time, you get stretched because you get to see perspectives, or you get to respond to questions from people that maybe are implementing in slightly different ways. And so, you know, when that happens, the impact or result of that is new growth and new thinking and new learning.
Natalia from Korea. I think, Natalia, your question is around the time commitment outside of the cohort session. I'm really glad you asked this. We really make an effort to minimize the time that you need to spend outside of the cohort preparing for the cohort. Typically, there will be an article to read prior to coming to the cohort, or a chapter from whatever the book is that we have asked the cohort members to purchase. But you have weeks of notice about that reading. It's usually no more than 20 minutes, I would say, at the most, a half an hour of reading. So I would say at the most it would be an hour of prep before the session. Varies session to session, but I would say that's fairly typical. And we give you a lot of notice, so you are not letting you know the week before the cohort, oh, by the way, you need to read all of this. We give you a lot of notice, and we really try to minimize the work that you have to do outside of the cohort. Really, the work is done when you're at the cohort session. That's when the large part of the work is done. Let's see.
Monica, another structure that we have to support all this is that, in preparation for each session and then in between each session, Monica sets up a website dedicated to your cohort. And so you can always go back to that website to find the resources, to find the links. And then, as I mentioned, many of the cohorts, the last few cohorts, because of technology, typically have a WhatsApp group. And even this cohort that just finished, the WhatsApp group has been on fire this week. And their discussion this week has been, how does your school approach writing their philosophy statements? And so people are chiming in with their tips and their processes, but then people are putting in the links to their school's philosophy statements and sharing their documents. And so that's been the hot topic this week is, and it's a member of this cohort was in the CEESA region when he joined the cohort, but he's moved. He's at Korea International School, actually. And he's the one who put out there and said, you know, we're looking at some of our philosophy statements, who has some examples. And now he's got 20 friends who are all giving examples just within a matter of hours.
And that really dovetails a little bit. Carly, I'm going to get to your question in a minute, but that dovetails a little bit with Sammy's question, asking about supporting a specific area that his school would like to work on, which is implementing reading time across all subjects. That's exactly the kind of issue that I could see you either bringing up at a cohort session or putting into the cohort chat, or Shannon, even the social media system that we're trying to put together for all of the cohort participants, the 175 who participate in the past. That's exactly the kind of question that you could share with them. And you'll be amazed how many people jump on board and have suggestions for you. So it's not just the work that's done during our sessions, it's the work that's done between our sessions with your cohort members. We just can't emphasize enough how this network supports other members of the network, both within your cohort, but also outside of your cohort. Sorry, I skipped over.
I can say, because the network, Monica, American International School of Budapest is asking that exact question right now. And so that's one of the ways, you know, that Monica and I can support too, is like because of the connections and because of knowing, like, we know that that very same question, Budapest is exploring that same question as we speak.
And we not only know what our cohort schools are working on and asking, but because we're both working with international schools, we know what other international schools are working on. So we definitely can link you up with those schools. Carly, I think we mentioned the texts that we've used. The resources are so extensive, I couldn't even begin to tell you. It's articles from so many different resources, but we've been leaning on Diane Sweeney's books the last couple of cohorts, right, Shannon? Did you want to share any other resources?
For coaching, yes, but and this kind of bridges that question with what Sam has put in the chat too, about like science of reading. So shifting the balance has been a big one in the last cohort, and both the one for early readers and then the shifting the balance 3 through 6 or 3 through 5. I can't remember off the top of my head, but shifting the balance has been a big one. At some point, know better, do better about early literacy was one. I'm trying to remember the last, Nikki just had one when we met at CEESA, and I can't remember exactly what the title was, but
and a couple of sessions we've had teachers actually bring a resource with them. Sometimes it's some sort of a document or initiative they're working on at their school. So we link it to our website, our shared website, but often teachers will bring books that they just have been reading and share it with the group. So there's a lot of resource sharing that's done formally, but there's also resource sharing that's done informally within the cohort and outside of the cohort sessions. And Sam, I think I asked your question about current reading science, but to answer again, I would say yes, that's a big part of our mission, is to be sure that the people who lead the cohort have the most current reading research and understand how to translate that into their school settings. And I think, see, either Micah or Ed attach the flyer to the chat so you can open that up. And I think we got through the questions, folks. If not, you have my email address, or you can add it right now. It's been lovely to meet all of you. I would appreciate it.
Before you go,
Go ahead, Ed.
before everybody runs out of the room now, just let me say thank you, Shannon and Monica, very much for this very informative opportunity for people to ask questions about the program. I just want to close with a comment. I've probably been in education longer than almost anybody else in the room, I'm sorry to say, or happy to say, depends on your point of view. And I've led a lot of change initiatives in the US at school districts and international schools. And there's one thing that is consistently clear to me, that you don't change schools by going to a weekend workshop or to a conference, as enjoyable and helpful as they may be. This program is based on how things really work. If you want to change the way you approach literacy in your school, then you need a person or a team committed to the very best practices. And to get that team prepared, you need the sustained commitment over time. A year or two is not that long in terms of building the skill sets that people need and the understanding. So I just want to let you know that we are really super happy that this project has emerged as a possibility in our region, because we believe that what they're doing is really going to help make a change. So I do hope that your heads of school will be able to come around to making the kind of commitment. It's a much bigger commitment than sending you to a workshop for, for a Thursday, Friday. There's much more to it than that. But I think that this is one of the critical dimensions of schools right now, looking at literacy and helping children read and learn how to read, and helping teachers deal with the increasing number of challenges that we have in this way. So thank you, Monica. Thank you all
Thanks.
for coming. Shannon,
Thank you.
wish you all well, wish you a good night's sleep. The rest of you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll look forward to hearing more about this program. Thanks so
Micah,
much.
if you go to the final slide, I just want to end with this comment from one of our participants, and I'm going to read it just because I love reading it. So excuse me for reading this to you, but this is from one of our participants. Never before has a professional development opportunity motivated, inspired, and empowered me to become a better educator, colleague, and teacher leader. I learned and practiced what it means to be an effective literacy coach. The worldwide network and friendships that have been established is one I know I will always be able to lean on, ask questions of, and hopefully visit for years to come. We hope that you'll become a part of that group very soon. Thank you all, and thank you, Ed and Micah and Shannon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you very
Have a
much.
good weekend.
Yeah, thanks for spending your Saturday morning.
Yeah, wow, that was impressive.
Thank you very much for today.
Thank you
You're
all. It was lovely. Great questions. Hope we see all of you, many of you.